This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gyro Drilling. They provide world-class drilling solutions for all types of projects. They specialise in auger, aircore and RC drilling. Head to the team at Gyro Drilling for all your mining needs and see how they can help you with your upcoming project. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. As this podcast grows, every subscriber helps. From those of you who watch this on YouTube or to those that listen on Spotify and Apple, every follower helps. If you do this one favour and hit follow on whatever platform you find us on, I promise I will continue to look and find fascinating people across the world and bring their perspectives to you. Thank you and enjoy this episode. So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. It's been a while since I've done one, but I'm back today speaking with Fabian Baker, the Managing Director of KingRose Metals, which is listed on the ASX under code KRM. It's an exploration company. It's had a fair bit of news coming out recently with its allegiance or agreements with BHP, but I won't talk about that. We'll get into that as we go. But welcome to the show, Fabian.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
So let's start with a bit about your background. It's, again, a small cap of about 30 mil market cap, at least last time I checked, listed on the ASX in that exploration of that Norway, Finland regions, and there's a fair bit of activity happening. But talk to us about your history within the mining and exploration scene and how did you get to this position where you are now?
Yeah, sure. I'm a geologist by background. Went and studied geology. Well, if I'm honest, because it meant I could go to university in Cornwall in England near the surf, and but steadily found out what this industry is about. And actually, my first role was with a company called Lydian International, which was TSX listed, and was a really exciting story. Basically, Tim Coughlin, the founder of that, who's now on the KingRose board, he's a fantastic explorer, and he had this great idea to go to Armenia, this little country of Armenia, and essentially discovered on the side of the road, well, what started with a rock chip and became a 5 million ounce gold deposit. So I got involved with that early on. Ultimately, I became chief geologist, and we saw that through a few resource iterations until basically a 5 million ounce resource and a feasibility study. So that was great to be a part of. Going on from there, I continued to sort of lead exploration programs in different places around the world. I was involved in setting up some exploration in Turkey, Morocco, parts of Indonesia, South America, and then ultimately founded my own company called Tethyan Resources. That was exploring in what we call the Tethyan mineral belt, which basically the western end of that is into Europe, in Eastern Europe, the Balkans. And we were focused on Serbia. And there we consolidated a historical mining district. It was known for lead and zinc mining, but we discovered that those lead zinc deposits were being driven by copper porphyries. So we put together quite a nice package there, got some really good quality investors behind us. There's a group called the Augusta Group, led by Richard Walk, who's a Canadian mining billionaire who backed what we did there. And that ultimately got acquired by Adriatic Metals. And actually, the chairman of KingRose, who I'd got to know, was a key investor and backer of that, got to know us. And so once we'd sold Adriatic, he said, look, could you come on, take on KingRose, work with us to turn KingRose around? So that's sort of how I got to where I am in KingRose.
I didn't know about that, but that's fascinating because, yeah, I've spoken with Adriatic and their sort of rise from really just land to project generation to now production is phenomenal. And that's a good sort of, I guess, segue between the two. But I mean, talk us about KingRose Metals. If someone's never heard of it before, they've seen it pop up on the ASX or again, these days on social media. What is the company about? And yeah, really, what is it looking for?
Sure. It's KingRose Mining, but that's fine.
Apologies.
That's all right. So when I took the company on, basically prior to that, its entire history had been around mining a small gold mine in Indonesia. A beautiful high-grade deposit called Walingo that had been discovered by our chairman. They put it into production, operated it for 10 years. It went from a really sweet high-grade little mine to then something that was struggling. And I think previous management basically had to focus so hard on eking out the profit from that there wasn't any exploration going on. There weren't any pipeline assets. So when that mine closed, the company was sort of stranded without any real direction. So that's sort of when me and my team got brought on. And from my point of view, we had a great starting point because we had 35 million Aussie dollars in cash, and we revamped the board with really good quality explorers, guys who have been successful in building junior companies around me. So I saw it had the right makings. And so what's KingRose now? Well, we completely refocused it on exploration, earlier stage exploration, which is what I do. We looked around the world for the right opportunities to get involved in, and ultimately focused in on Scandinavia, specifically Finland and Norway. Finland's regularly sort of rated as one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world. It's got a long history of mining. Norway a bit less so, and really we've been able to be a first mover there, as they're revamping their mining code, but they have a long history in resources. Obviously oil and gas for them is hugely important, so they understand these sorts of businesses. It's just not mining, and mineral exploration hasn't been a big part of their economy, but that's changing. So yeah, we went into that region and established a really high quality portfolio of projects. So in Finland, we've taken on what we call the Pennycap Project. This is probably, if not the world's highest grade, one of the world's highest grade PGE exploration projects that's undeveloped. High grade mineralization starting from surface. It's got real scale to it. And it's got a lot of data. There was about 100 drill holes drilled in the 80s there, so that looks really exciting. Tell you more about it. But then we've also got Rana in Norway, which is a past producing nickel, copper, cobalt mine with huge exploration potential around that we're exploring. And then thirdly, we were recently selected by BHP to be a part of the Explore program, which was a few hundred applicants that got whittled down to 7. We were one of those. And then we've gone on to announce a major long-term alliance with BHP, which is a bit of a first of its kind. And we announced that just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we've got a portfolio of exploration going on in Scandinavia at the moment.
Well, we'll start with the BHP news because I know that was the more recent one, and then we've got the permitting that's been coming out. But yeah, talk us through this alliance program. When did you guys initially start this process to getting the big news that, yeah, you guys and BHP are going to be joint exploring this? And there's a few more details that are all in the announcement. But yeah, talk us through some of those exciting steps and processes involved in that.
Yeah, sure. So kind of like I was saying, this is an idea that we had sitting in our back pocket, where there's fantastic geology in Finland that's known and hosts some really significant deposits. So in Finland, there's a large open pit mining operation called Kevitsa. It's one of the largest nickel copper PGE operations in Europe. And then just next door to that, Anglo American made quite a recent sort of really world-class discovery of Sakatti. Now, that geology we recognize swings north across the border and into Norway. And so this is one of the concepts that we took to BHP, basically that whole part of the belt, the Norwegian part, was massively underexplored. So we came to them with that idea. That's when we got selected as part of this Explore program. And then over the following sort of 12 months, working closely with them, with some funding from them, we've basically consolidated ownership of the whole belt. So we've got about 200 kilometers of strike of hugely prospective ground. We've generated a bunch of targets within that from reprocessing historical data and then capturing some of our own. And we're just putting boots on the ground and literally stumbling over outcropping, high-grade, massive sulfide, copper, nickel, PGE mineralization. We've been working with the Norwegian Geological Survey, who are just doing some new sort of more academic work like age dating, but it's really helpful for us because they're basically finding the exact same intrusions that host Sakatti on our ground, dated as exactly the same age, and we're finding mineralization at surface within those. So all the right ingredients for potentially a major discovery. So that was sort of the concept. And there's actually another belt in Finland further south with a similar idea, a historical mining district that we're consolidating. And basically, BHP, we've gone from that Explore program to now a full, what we call alliance.
Yes.
And that's basically where they're going to fund us for $5 million US, or just a little under 8 million Aussie per year, to explore these regional concepts for up to 4 years. And then it can go into basically an earn-in JV. I guess what I'd say is we're really proud of this deal because joint ventures between a junior and a larger company, there's a few issues with them that tend to come around where, for example, there's a big splashy number. Such major's going to earn 75% by spending, tens and tens of millions, but the step to 51% is actually quite small and spread out over, say, 3 years. So you can get in a scenario where they either just drag their feet and don't spend the money and the project kind of stalls, or if they do meet the 51% hurdle, it might not then be meeting, their expectations, and they can sort of sit on it with a majority position, and again, the project stalls. So we've tried to address those issues where they've got to spend money every year. And when they commit to 1 year, they have to see it through and spend that money. So we're going to get that $5 million US each year that they commit to, and we'll be able to spend that and move the project forwards. They spend a lot of money, initially up to 20 million US over 4 years, just doing regional exploration. And they don't get any equity in KingRose or the projects for that. They just get the right to choose smaller areas to become an earn-in. And everything they don't choose comes back to us 100%. So that's great. We're de-risking a huge generative exploration program at their cost. And being BHP, the world's largest mining company, they're only looking for massive world-class assets. So anything that's smaller than that will come back to us and could still be really meaningful. If they do select projects, they have a right to take it all the way to 75% by spending another 36 million US, or about 55 million Aussie, which is a significant spend. They have to spend money every year to keep the project. And basically, if they don't make it to 75%, but they have got to 51, if they don't make it to 75, they actually revert to 49%. We keep a majority and we can keep the project moving. So we just think it's a really elegant sort of solution to some of the issues that you see in JVs. It helps move the project forwards. And basically, if we end up with 25% of a BHP size asset, great. Anything less than that, we'll own a majority and can keep the project moving.
And then going through this and setting this up, as you said, is this just been through understanding how mining has traditionally been done and seeing this unfold? And this is where you guys and the team were like, no, we're going to try this differently and see if BHP does bite. And from the sounds of it, it's a win-win naturally for both parties, but especially from that small side of town, it alleviates all those stresses and those risking projects that you just said. How did those sort of come about? Is that mostly board or your own personal, or how did that all sort of emerge?
Yeah, look, I mean, these things are always a team effort, but we've led that, myself and the team, to this point. And I think what we're trying to do with KingRose is, the money that we've got in the bank today, we've got about 26 million in cash today, and it's given us the chance to basically just step back and look at how we're operating and think about it. And rather than sort of be on this junior exploration treadmill where you're always sort of chasing your tail, trying to raise money, hand to mouth. It allows us to step back and think, well, how do we create something that's got more longevity, real exploration opportunities? And so this was just one of those concepts. And it just worked really well in terms of timing with BHP because, they're also coming to the party with some new ideas themselves. So it was a nice meeting in the middle where they're wanting to kind of reframe how majors get involved in exploration and be a bit more in touch with smaller companies and do deals that are a win-win. While at the same time, we were bringing to them a concept that fits a major, but being operated at a higher standard than, you'd often see in the junior space. And so, the two went well together. And essentially, I think I could sell them on the fact that, doing a good deal with us that's win-win, make them partner of choice for juniors, which I think is becoming the case. Basically is a win-win for both of us.
And I think, as we see with a lot of European manufacturers and this whole race of electric vehicles and sustainable batteries, that a lot of companies are looking to source stuff from within European countries, particularly a lot of the car manufacturers. And it's kind of going to this no-brainer of, well, we have to sort of be a little bit more pro-mining in some of these jurisdictions that might have been very excited about it, but sort of dwindle it down. And now there's this real recognition that, for a BHP, if I can get a foothold with a company in a first-class region that's close to the EU manufacturing, it's just a tick, tick, tick. And you can sort of see that sort of unpacking, which it's a long story. Won't go through all that. But if we go to the Pennycap project you mentioned earlier, that's really one of the highlights, or at least the first one that you mentioned. Talk us through the history of that project. You said there was a bit previously done, and you guys have now inherited and built it up to quite a scale. So talk us through, just about this project in details.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to touch on your point, this is PGEs in Finland, and that's exactly, the case where the world's PGE supply, more than 90% of it comes from Russia or South Africa, which are both, experiencing these issues. Where else in the world can, EU car manufacturers get PGEs, which are critical to catalytic converters? Well, an asset set in Finland's ideal. And actually, if you look at our latest release where we talk about our permits on Pennycap, we've shown the EU critical minerals list. And I find it interesting. PGEs basically sit as the most critical after rare earths, much more so than nickel, copper, cobalt, lithium, because that's that combination of supply risk and economic importance. So it's ideal. And so that's kind of what we saw play into why we took on Pennycap, which we did a deal to acquire that project about 2 years ago. And what we have there is in Finland, about 15 kilometers away from a major port that currently ships out lots of Finland's timber, but also concentrates from the mines. There's a big steelworks, and there's actually a large mining operation just next door. So it's a mining area, industrial hub. And next door to that is Pennycap, which was drilled by essentially the Finnish state mining company back in the 80s. And they discovered what's called a layered intrusion, which is quite a rare style of geology that you only see in a handful of places around the world, but it's basically where most of the world's PGEs come from. And a way to think about it is it's basically a big magma chamber full of molten magma. And as it cooled, certain minerals rich in PGEs basically settled out, rained out, and draped the floor of the intrusion. And the reason I explain all of that is because that process means you get these really large deposits that are really continuous, so a long strike down dip. And actually, at Pennycap's happened 3 times. So you've had 3 pulses where, and these mineralized layers are called reefs. So we've got 3 mineralized reefs at Pennycap. They stick out at surface. They dip at about 50 degrees. And we can trace them for a total of 25 kilometers in total on our ground. And so the Finnish state in the 80s drilled about 100 drill holes into these. Generally quite shallow, just in the top 50 to 100 meters. 99 of them hit mineralization. That's how consistent this ore body is. And they're quite narrow, generally just a few meters, but here it's really high grade. And again, if people look at our corporate presentation, we've actually plotted sort of where our grades sit on a grade tonnage plot with other PGE deposits around the world. And essentially we're sitting way up there at or above most of the world's PGE assets. So that's quite rare because a lot of the PGE exploration stories that have been kind of brought to the market recently are sort of 1 or 2 grams, whereas we're talking 4 to 8, even more grams, combined PGEs. So the asset's really compelling. These 100 drill holes allowed us to do what we call an exploration target, so JORC compliant exploration target. This is sort of a precursor to a resource. It's sort of what a resource could be. Normally, I don't pay a lot of attention to these. They can be quite promotional, arm-wavy, based on a lot of information. Here, we felt like it made more sense to do it because you've got a combination of 100 drill holes of data, plus a style of geology that's really consistent. So it's a lot more, I'd say, reasonable to basically make these kind of assumptions and see what you've got. And essentially what we have as a result of that is a multi-million ounce potential deposit sticking out at surface at world-class grades down the road from a current mine and a shipping port. So that's all kind of all the ingredients that you'd want. I guess the challenge that we've had for the last couple of years is there is a low-level environmental designation over the area. It's called Natura 2000. And it's something that basically covers about 1/5 of the whole of the EU. So development's not prohibited in those areas. It's not a national park. There's just a higher bar required in terms of operating that. So to get our permits to be able to drill, our exploration permit, we've had to go through a process of doing surveys. So flora and fauna, what animals, what plant life is there, plan our drill routes and pad locations to make sure we're minimizing our impact. So we've been through all of that, and actually we've just announced, after a couple of years of hard work, that all the key authorities that were in that process, from the Ministry of Environment through to the Mines Department, have now given us approvals, and so we've got our permits for drilling, which is really exciting. There is a caveat to that. They've just been approved. There's the ability for people to appeal that, and it can happen that environmental NGOs chuck in an appeal. To be honest, with all the work we've done that backs up our application, and the fact that an appeal has never successfully overturned an exploration license in Finland, we're very confident we'll get our permits now. Basically, the hard work's been done. All the authorities have given us a tick, but there's a chance that that appeals process could set us back a few months and mean we're not drilling until next year. But essentially, big news from our point of view, because we have all the regulatory approvals now to basically drill what we think could be a world-class high-grade PGE asset.
And for listeners that are seeing the news come through now, you say it's taken a few years. I mean, to put it in perspective, I mean, how many years has this taken to get all the correct permitting, environmental, everything sorted so that you could get this approved? And then, yeah, I think I've seen it with other companies in that region. There's still that next process. But if you get that far ahead, the likelihood is that it's very hard to overturn that again. But you know, how long is this whole process taken?
It's been a little over 2 years, which is a long time. I mean, it's been a learning process for us. You know, we've built up our sustainability team to make sure we can do it. And, you know, there's a learning process on both sides. So what the authorities said they were looking for then sort of evolved. And so we had to go back and do some more surveys. And, you know, the problem is when somebody says, well, actually, we've found that this important plant is in the area. Can you survey that one? Well, if it doesn't flower until May and you're told that in September, you can't see them until then. So there's just the realities of that time frame. Authorities asking for things and not really recognizing how it impacts a company like us in terms of time frame. You know, it's just been part of the challenge. But you know, we've worked through it, and to be honest, it's another example of kind of how KingRose can do things a bit differently, because we've got the cash. It gives us the time and the ability to have a team that can do that sort of standard work. And so I think, you know, a lot of, to be honest, you know, less well-funded companies wouldn't have taken on that project or would have struggled to see it through. So, you know, it's kind of part of our strategy to be able to go in on these really great opportunities, but that just need that bit more time and money to basically uncover the value. So it's nice that we've been able to sort of deliver on what we said we'd do, and you know, I think we're at the point now where the hard work from an exploration permitting point of view is done, and you know, we'll be drilling the project hopefully as soon as possible.
Yeah, talking about the drilling, I assume you've got a drilling program with identified sites and how many. It's hard to say exactly when the date will be, and I know there's seasonality components. Is it certain times a year that you're allowed to drill in Finland, which will also impact sort of operation? But looking at what is in part, how many drill holes are you looking at doing? Are there key targets and areas? I mean, how are you going to expand this resource and I guess continue on from those 100 drill holes that were previously done?
Yeah, so a few points there. Seasonality. So for us, we basically are committing to only drill in the winter. So when there's snow cover, you can drive a rig in over the snow without damaging the ground. So that basically is from 1st of December through to March to May, on certain areas, just depending on there's different breeding areas of different species. So there's just a bit of variability there. But again, what we're lucky in having is an ore body that sticks out the surface and we know where it is. So this is kind of less exploration, it's more resource definition. And so we know where to put rigs. In terms of the first drill program, really it's going to be about showing scale. So from our point of view, we can do quite wide space drill holes along strike and particularly down dip, basically to show that this has the scale potential to be a multi-million ounce deposit. And also get sample for some met work, so metallurgy. You know, it's a key step that, you know, in any project, often it gets sort of delayed a bit But from our point of view, that's a really important aspect. If we can show scale and encouraging metallurgy, then we know we're onto something really, really exciting, and it's worth focusing on as a company and investing in more. So that first drill program will be wide space, showing scale. Once that's defined, we'll then be able to come in with a second one to sort of expand on that, but also infill and basically get to a maiden resource. So we think with a couple of years worth of drilling, we can get to a maiden resource that's in the millions of ounces at high grade. And so, I think the project can move forwards from a technical point of view really quickly once we hit the ground with the rigs.
And whilst that's all happening, you've also got the other project, the Rana Project, which you alluded to earlier. And I can imagine some of the learnings that you're taking from this project, probably at a slightly different timeline, but you're adding that to a similar, similar region, but different mining jurisdiction. So talk us through about that project. That's the one that's located in Norway, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's great. We can leverage, we're building a high quality team in the area. So while we've got things going through permitting, we can be building a geology team that's really capable and more active on Rana, and then they can transition on to Pennycap. Rana was a past producing nickel, copper, cobalt mine that closed a little over 20 years ago. And it's a classic case of what we see throughout Scandinavia, where a lot of exploration mining was done by basically government agencies. And there was a mining mindset more than an exploration mindset. So they'd find something sticking out of the ground, they'd put a few holes into it, and if they could see a few years mine life, they'd stick it into production. Basically, producing metal was the priority more than scale or economics. And so they found mineralization at Rana, sort of followed their nose, got stuck into mining, and actually they started off mining about 0.5% nickel, but actually as they got deeper, they hit the base of this mineralized intrusion and found a beautiful 1 to 5% nickel high-grade zone at the base of that. And they ended up mining that for about 13 years. Now that's just, that little mine, it's called the Bruvan mine, is in one spot on a 10-kilometer across intrusion of the same geology. And we're finding all around that mineralization sticking out the ground. There's one area 4 kilometers away called Rambogen, where you can walk up the hill, and there's 1.6 kilometers of a series of outcrops of massive sulfide, nickel, copper, cobalt mineralization sticking out the ground that have basically never been drilled. And so we're the first to kind of do more of a broader exploration effort across that geology, and also apply modern geophysics. And these sulfide deposits stand out beautifully using EM, electromagnetic geophysics, which basically tell you've got massive sulfides. So we've run that over part of this Rambogen area and generated a bunch of targets. We drilled some of them for the first time last year and had some really nice hits. So we hit just over 26 meters at 0.7% nickel, 0.3 copper with a nice cobalt component. Within that, there's a high grade 10 meters of massive sulfide. And we've now got a series of targets just like that running down the hill from there, where again, you've got massive sulfides at surface, beautiful EM plates at depth, and they're there to be drilled. So we're actually going to be mobilizing a rig to Rana in August to drill those for the first time. So it's a really exciting project. As I say, there's the same style of mineralization from the mine 10 kilometers away on the other side of the intrusion. So this has got real scale potential, and we're seeing high grades. It's also right on a major port in Norway. Interestingly, many years ago, there was a railway built from this big Swedish iron ore mines running across the border into Norway to exactly basically down the road from our project. And that's the major deep water port that ships out 25 million tons a year of iron ore. So again, you've got amazing infrastructure right on our doorstep, a historical mine where we know the metallurgy was very good, and this huge prospective piece of geology to go and explore. So it's a great asset. I guess the challenge is it's nickel dominant, and nickel prices have been hurt a lot lately. Sentiment's way down in terms of nickel assets. So from our point of view, we can move it forwards. We're looking to drill some good holes over the next couple of months, but at the same time, we can kind of just take our time putting together the targets, and hopefully the market improves. And I think almost regardless of of the fluctuations of commodity pricing, it's pretty rare to find sulfide nickel, or with this sort of scale potential right by infrastructure. So we think there's a lot to be said for it, because a lot of the nickel things that we're looking at and we see around the world are in really remote areas, middle of Canada in a swamp, or in the desert in Australia. And the difference with base metal projects is you need infrastructure versus gold or diamonds. You can't stick them in a helicopter and fly them out and get paid. You've got to be able to truck, thousands of tons of concentrate. And so, that's again where we've got a bit of a leg up on this project.
Yeah, across both, really. You mentioned that in the Pennycap project as well, that it's near ports, it's near distribution networks, what I think is incredibly important, because we just know if you can find something in the middle of nowhere, then the logistics is a nightmare. And you say there you've got drilling come up in August, but again, it's a lot more of a thorough thinking through of what the next steps are. I mean, are there any other sort of opportunities on the horizon with expanding that? Or you've got 10 kilometers, it's not really a short amount of space, but are there any other factors that you need to consider there, similar with the Finland, like environmental permitting or anything like that, or is that already all been ticked off as well?
From an environmental point of view, it's kind of standard process stuff. I guess what we're doing as a whole as KingRose, again, trying to kind of elevate our game. We've got a sustainability team, and so what we're doing on all of our projects, whether it's got a Natura designation or not, is make sure we're doing a kind of first pass environmental and sort of social and cultural surveys. So we go in, we bring in archaeologists to make sure we're looking for any significant cultural sites. We are doing a lot of community engagement, and then we're also bringing in biologists basically to do basic biodiversity surveys as well before we bring a first rig on the site. So we're going above and beyond the regulatory requirements, but that's obviously breeding trust with the government in terms of helping us get through permitting, and also building trust with the communities. So we're on a good track there. One of the challenges that we have in Norway, which we don't on our Finnish projects, is the very north of Norway is the traditional homeland of the indigenous Sami people, who traditionally reindeer herding is a part of their culture and their way of life. And so a lot of these areas are used for reindeer herding. It's sort of migratory. So the herds move from one area to the next, winter to summer. And so that's kind of one of our main challenges, is just trying to kind of collaborate with them so that we can sort of operate our exploration without having an impact, and consider their needs. So that's kind of a process of building trust and finding the windows of time where we can work when they're not needing to be in the area. So that's really the main consideration we have in Norway.
Okay. And from the outset, you've said you guys have been very diligent with how you've kept cash on hand and have not gone, hand over fist, having to go back to market and raise. And with the BHP assistance, there's money coming in there to deploy on exploration. I mean, what are your plans to really not spend it, but what have you got? What are you guys thinking from big picture with a bit of cash, a fair bit of cash in the bank? Are you just going to continue doing this? Are you looking at other projects or aspects or expanding? I mean, what's going through your mind with a bit of a healthy bank balance for, as you said, a junior explorer?
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, we've got about 26 million in cash right now, and a couple of years ago when I took on the company, we were looking at different assets, and we were looking at more advanced projects. But basically, at that time, the market was quite frothy, and valuations, we just couldn't justify them. Things we'd have offered a couple of $1 million for. People were, raising 10 million on the market and getting a 20-30 million market cap for early stage stuff. And to be honest, we just couldn't justify competing with that on those sort of high risk early stage assets. The scenario has changed a bit recently. I think the market, although commodity prices have had a nice bump in the last few months, juniors are still really struggling to raise money, and so a lot of valuations are right down. And so what we want to do is what we've been able to do by bringing BHP in is help preserve our cash balance, so move forward some exciting early stage exploration. But that also covers about 2 million Aussie a year of our current team costs. So we've managed to really offset a lot of that and put those people to work on that generative program. That preserves the cash that we've got today. And what we want to do is put that to work on a more advanced project. So we're running a BD effort, basically. We're looking around the world for a potential acquisition of a more advanced project, something at a resource stage or even with an economic study. And, you know, I guess it remains to be seen what we jump for, what we go for. You know, I can't exactly predict timelines or exactly what we'll go for. However, you know, we've been running the process a little while and we are whittling it down to a few key opportunities that we really like. And I guess what we're focusing on is, I guess, grade. Grade is king. We're looking for margin and profitability of a potential project over scale. Sort of the last thing we want to do is take on an asset, you know, a huge low-grade asset that's going to require billions of capex to build, and ultimately we won't be able to raise the money as a smaller company to take it right the way through. You know, we mentioned Adriatic earlier that I've been involved in. You know, it's a great example of how a company with a high-grade, high-margin asset can take a project from exploration through studies and development and into production, and keep that beautiful, you know, their share price graph.
The trajectory's been great.
You know,
yeah,
it's phenomenal, and that's sort of what we want to emulate. And that's where, yeah, we're looking for something ideally with a strong copper component. We think, you know, the fundamentals around copper. You know, it's not chasing the hottest commodity of the month, but you know, it's one that I think's got a positive outlook, but also underpinned by just, you know, fundamentals that exist today. So copper element to it, high grade, and you know, it doesn't need to be massive, but just needs to deliver, you know, something that we think could be a mine one day.
No, fantastic. I mean, we talked about the team at the beginning. You said that you came in and then you started building people around you that had the experience and the knowledge in complementary skill sets. So talk us through who else is surrounding you on this board. And I know we're speaking remotely. The team is sort of sprawled out all over the world, but yet everyone's sort of coming together frequently and working. So talk to us about that whole process. As the modern day now is you can really work anywhere and still get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really proud of the team. You know, for me, having worked in a few different companies, you know, ultimately a good quality team is just key to success. And you know, you hear that spoken about in terms of investors looking for the right investment. And I think it's true. You know, a team that understands what it's doing and can also shift gears and focus on, you know, when the facts change plans. You know, there's a lack, unfortunately, of kind of honesty where, you know, when a project's not working out and juniors saying, you know, I'm going to not spend any more shareholders, you know, hard-won money on a project that's not going to make it, and actually we're going to focus on something new that we think can. So I guess that kind of underpins the philosophy of all of our team. You know, I think we're good, genuine explorers that are trying to do good, honest exploration. So key people, we've got our head of exploration, Andrew Tunningley. He's a guy that's worked with me for 5 or 6 years now. He was a key part of Tethyan previously that helped build up that company to the point where Adriatic took it over. You know, he's an exceptional geologist, really good at sort of leading by example and running the technical team. What we've also done that's a bit more unusual is put on an experienced head of sustainability. So Graham, in that role, is just creating so much value for us, which can be seen through the Pennycap process. You know, that's an asset with clear, huge value based on all the historical drilling, but basically needed a really high quality permitting and sustainability process to unlock it. And that's, you know, for us, sustainability is not just a sort of a nice to have or kind of a greenwashing thing. You know, it's good business. You know, if it gets us social license, access to opportunity where others can't get it, brings in investment from groups like BHP, it's good business. So Graham and the team that he's building, you know, are really important to KingRose. And you know, and then we've got a host of others, you know, that underpin what we do that I'm really proud of. Then on the board side, our chairman, Mike Andrews, so he discovered the Wailingo mine, which was the original gold mine that KingRose used to operate and was sort of the beginnings of KingRose. But in addition to that, he's, you know, got a long career where he's successfully worked in larger companies, but also built up a couple of juniors to be successful. And actually, a couple of, you know, mines have been built on the back of projects that he's been involved in driving forwards. And I'd say the rest of the team, are a mix of exceptional explorers. So we've got John Carlisle. He discovered the Gossawong district. He was Newcrest's first geohide outside of Australia that went on to discover where I think about 6 million ounces of gold have been mined at 40 grams. So a really world-class gold discovery. Tim Coughlin, as I mentioned before, discovered the Amulsar project that Lydian I worked with was on and has been chief geo for majors, and now is operating some successful juniors. And then we've got an interesting dynamic where we've got Daryl Corp, who comes from a major mining background. He headed up business development. He did feasibility studies on some of the major Newcrest mines and so on. So he brings that experience on more advanced projects and in how sort of the larger corporates operate. And then we've got Andrew Cook, who is a lawyer by background and helps keep us on the right track with the ASX from a regulatory point of view, and really sort of helps underpin a lot of those processes. So it's still a small, nimble team, but I think we cover a lot of bases, and I think we punch above our weight in the markets, and hopefully we keep on this trajectory where we're starting to deliver on these key milestones that we set out to.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth there. It's a very comprehensive team from the sounds of it, and a lot of proven exploration and geology background, and founded like finding resources and huge scale ones is something that a lot of people want to do. And it's only fortunate if you get to, and it sounds like there's a few really within the same suite that you've got. But looking forward over the next 12 months, there's a fair bit happening, and I always like to round out conversations with like key takeaways, as I know everyone likes things in threes or however many. I won't limit you, but from today's conversation, what really can people take away and look forward to over the next 12 months from KingRose?
Yeah, well, first of all, you heard about the team, and we've got nearly 26 million in cash, so we don't need a cap raise anytime soon. We've got drilling starting at Rana in really the coming weeks. We've got the BHP program that's just kicked off, so we've got a massive 8 million Australian dollar exploration program going across a few parts of Scandinavia. So there's going to be lots of new targets developed out of that over the coming months. Just announced our permits at Pennycap, so we're basically nearing the finish line where we can look to essentially mobilize rigs onto that project. And then finally, the search for another more advanced asset is ongoing, and that could come sort of any time now. And that will really be that final, I guess, piece of the puzzle where we round out the portfolio. We've got something where we can show a resource, something working towards a development project with regular news flow, drilling, and then everything else coming through the pipeline. So yeah, plenty going on. I think the next 6 to 12 months are going to be quite transformational for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects that people could really latch onto and get looking forward to, but there's a whole host of it. And the $1 million question is, how can people follow the company? How can they stay in contact? As I said, it's listed on the ASX KRM, but how can they potentially reach out to anyone in the team or follow it and keep a hold of all this news that's going to be coming?
Yeah, absolutely. We just launched a new website, so you can find, a lot of stuff about us there. Follow us on Twitter or X now, and any other socials. We got quite a lot being promoted through there that you can follow the story. info@kingsrose.com is the email where people can reach out, and I'm always happy to chat with interested people and who might want to invest in the company. We're happy to give them our time. So all sorts of opportunities to follow what we're doing and get in touch.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. You've given us a very good in-depth look at the entire company, and there's so much that's going to be happening. And I think there'll be a few that are putting it in their watch lists and monitoring it. But thank you so much, Fabian, for taking the time to speak with me on the show today.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Marketbull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Marketbull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.